Welcome to this special video edition of That Brexit Business Show. I'm Malcolm Gallagher. It's coming up to 5 years, yes, I said 5, since the whole Brexit process started. So we thought that it deserved a special edition between myself and my co-host, Hugh Morgan-Williams. Welcome, Hugh.
Thank you, and good to see you.
Yes,
even if only virtually.
Yes, it's the safest way at the moment with COVID, isn't it? It's 5 years since the formal start of the Brexit process. So what's your straight thoughts on where we are now, both as a nation and as people?
That's a very good question. I think we are where we were 5 years ago. Any opinion poll will tell you that the country is still just as divided now as it was at the time of the referendum. And I think it's quite interesting to reflect on where we are now, because the world order has changed since Brexit was agreed. And we're now in a situation where the rules don't apply anymore. So I think it's really quite interesting to reflect at this point. The government has always said they wanted an Asia-Pacific tilt to their trade policy. Well, that's now more difficult. The longer your supply chain is, the more difficult it is to maintain. And I think it's quite interesting, if you talk to economists about where we should be trading, they would say, yes, well, the growth economies of the Pan-Asian Pacific region are the ones that we should be trading with. But at the same time, if anyone's got any experience of trade, then you trade with your neighbours and those closest to you. And I think that's one of the main problems that has come about over the last 5 years. There's been a difference of view between the pure economist and the practical exporter or importer, who will tell you that long supply chains, long routes, are not only more costly, but they're much more difficult and likely to go wrong. I mean, we only had a couple of years ago that huge vessel stuck in the Suez Canal, and everybody's Christmas presents were holed up on a container ship for weeks.
Yes. I'm regularly in America with the Zoom calls, and they're looking increasingly closely at Mexico to replace China. Because, as they say, it's closest and there's not a wall there between them. But they are looking to reduce the length of those supply chains. That's sensible, isn't it?
It is sensible, because you keep your costs more under control. You only have to look at what's happened to shipping rates over the course of the last 12 months to realise that the longer you have on your import routes and the longer you have on your export routes, the less profit you make. Because no one is going to ask you to change your prices as a result of costs that you have voluntarily opted for.
My second question to you, Hugh, what do you think has been achieved, and let's say it, sadly not achieved? Have we been misled, or was there too much optimism?
I think there was too much political dogma, and I think that's influenced policy in a way that is not easy, and in fact, I'd go so far as to say it's very difficult. If we look at the positive, what have we achieved? Well, we have achieved blue passports. We've achieved crown marks on glasses. We have opted to go for a more imperial measurement system. A lot of people would say that's a backward step, not a forward step, but they are achievements. I think, if you like, there is an achievement which is hard to pin down, and it's a soft achievement. And that is that people are thinking very much more carefully about their business and trading relationships now than they did before. And I think that's a good thing. If you look at what hasn't been achieved, well, we're suffering more delays at the borders because the paperwork chains are longer. The administrative burdens are greater. If you look at the volumes of trade, certainly in terms of Europe, those volumes of trade have gone down, and there's no disguising that figure. And the government's keen to say, well, it's all as a result of COVID. Well, the figures do not lie, and they would indicate that, yes, COVID has had an effect, but the effect of Brexit has been greater. So the other thing that we do have as a positive is we have to reposition our companies and reposition our businesses to ensure that we can maximize what the situation is. Who are we going to be able to trade with, at what cost, and how permanent are those relations likely to be? I think it was Gerald Ratner who said it takes years to build a business and 30 seconds to destroy one. And in a way, and that's because he said his stuff was crap. And I do remember that. A lot of people do as well. And it's the same with your export business. I mean, I can remember taking 10 years to build up an export business in a particular country. You're not going to lose that because you've got a whole lot of costs sunk into those relationships. And yet Brexit has done that. And a lot of people are saying that it's very much more difficult now to do business in Europe. It's difficult because the European customer isn't quite sure how reliable you're going to be. It's difficult in terms of cost. It's very difficult in terms of admin load and paperwork. The rules of origin, for example, those are really difficult. How do you calculate how much Britishness is in your product? And if you sell thousands of products, you've got to do it for every one. So the administrative burden is very much greater. And also, I think in a way, the government is saying to people, they're offloading responsibility and saying it's up to businesses to work out how they're going to progress. And yet it's the government that's actually reset all relationships. So there is a difficulty there.
Yes, yeah.
And also the other thing I was going to say, in terms of the abolition of freedom of movement, a lot of businesses, particularly in the hospitality sector and the agricultural sector, have been hit so badly by that because they haven't been able to get the labor they need to harvest the crops, man bars and tables in hotels and restaurants. And it's been really difficult. And of course, as a result of all that, the labor rates have gone up massively. So not only have you got product inflation coming through, you've also got wage inflation coming through as well. And for some businesses, it's a perfect storm.
Yeah, I was just thinking, reflecting what you were saying there, and I've got a client who's in the security tab business. They make security tabs for police and places like that. And they used to get the product, or they were getting the product from China. And sometimes there was a 5-month lead-in time. Now, that's no good at all, of course. So what they've done is they've bought a machine with some grant money, and they can produce the same work in 5 days. Now, that's then given them the opportunity to export to those places that were buying from China and taking 5 months. So, there is an opportunity around, isn't there, if you prepared to take the blinkers off and look for them?
Certainly. And I think you can say exactly the same in terms of microchips. I mean, the European car industry has been poleaxed by the lack of available microchips which go into every single car. However, the cost of actually building your own is prohibitive, and only probably 1 or 2 businesses in Europe can actually do that, and that requires huge investment. So there is a real problem at the moment in terms of translating those opportunities into practical business objectives and business investments, because the numbers are so large.
Now, Hugh, third question. The war in Ukraine is a sad situation. Do you think, though, it may be causing a number of people to think the UK should still be integrated with the EU, especially at these times? Or is membership of NATO enough to show unity?
I think that's a really interesting debate, because certainly as a result of Putin's aggression in Ukraine, the whole European landscape has been reset, almost without anybody accepting it, or indeed say, well, we didn't ask for this. No, I mean, the Ukrainians didn't ask for tanks on their streets. They didn't ask for cities to be bombed into oblivion. And as a result of that, there is, I think, an unprecedented sense of unity amongst European countries. And with that, I also mean the UK. This is a unity of purpose to ensure that evil does not succeed. How far that goes, I think, is the question. Certainly, this country's been at the forefront of humanitarian aid and lethal aid. I think we were the first country to send weaponry to the Ukraine. But that was not an easy thing to do. I mean, the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, had to battle the Treasury and he had to battle the Foreign Office to get those deals through. So I think up until the day the tanks rolled in, there was skepticism that this was going to happen. If, from a security point of view, you are thrust upon your neighbours, then you need to have the trade to back it up. And I suppose, in a way, what it points to, in my mind, is a closer European relationship, not necessarily membership of the single market or membership of the EU, but I think this country will find it necessary, from a security point of view, to tighten their relationships with the EU, maybe adopt a Norwegian style or a Swiss style sort of associate membership. And I think that is something which will increasingly become something people talk about. In terms of security, NATO is not enough. NATO will only react when they are provoked, which invokes Article 5 of the NATO treaty. So they will strengthen their borders, strengthen the defence, but they won't actually aggressively react unless one of their members is invaded or has an incursion onto their territory. So NATO is not enough. And I think we can also see this as well in terms of the appalling refugee crisis. And there is a completely different approach. Here in the UK, we're insisting on visas. The rest of Europe has thrown open their doors and said, any Ukrainian can come here for 3 years without any checks. We'll give them the right to work, the right to social security, the right to education. That's a very generous move. And I think our government is quite a long way from actually doing a similar thing. And that saddens me, that we have a vast welling up of humanitarian feelings and action for Ukraine. What was it, 140,000 homes opening themselves up for Ukrainian refugees. The issue is going to be, how are they going to get here with a visa system? It seemed to me, and it also seemed to others, that the Home Office was putting obstacles in the way of Ukrainian refugees coming here in the hope they go somewhere else. I think that mood is now changing, but it does mean that we're out of step with mainland Europe in how we deal with the crisis, and a crisis it certainly is. And I think we will be judged in future on how we've reacted to that, and that is in itself going to have a knock-on effect on trade relationships.
Now, I know you're very passionate about good and effective leadership. We've probably seen Zelensky doing a great job, the president of Ukraine. I'm not so sure about Boris, because there's that big faux pas he made at the Conservative Party conference, liking the Brexit referendum to Ukraine. Surely that's not the right type of leadership that we need.
Boris is Boris, and I think he does say things in the moment that he often regrets later. What was it? Make a decision in haste and repent at leisure.
Yes,
and I think he's got a track record in doing this kind of thing. I personally don't think he meant to cast aspersions on Remainers and say that they were not freedom-loving individuals. But that's certainly the impression he has created in a remark like that. I think also a lot of Europeans, there's Donald Tusk and there's a couple of others who reacted strongly, and they're saying that it actually casts doubt on European humanitarianism. We are freedom lovers just in the same way that you are. Guy Verhofstadt has said that we'd be welcome back in the European family. I think even he would say not on the same terms as we left. That would be too big an ask. But he sees, and I think Donald Tusk sees, who is a great friend of Britain, that it's important and indeed vital that Europe as a body has closer relationships with the UK. I think it's unfortunate what Boris says and said, because it it could be taken, well, it has been taken the wrong way. I'm sure he didn't mean that only people who actually voted for Brexit were freedom loving, but that's the impression he gave. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, you can't afford to make those little faux pas these days because people are so tense with COVID or mental health or whatever it may be, and leaders are having to be compassionate and understanding. And it's just a little thing like that can flick the switch, can't it?
Well, I think also it's important. I think one of the definitions of leadership is that you leave your own interests at the door. And you are looking to lead a nation with many different views, many different desires, in the hope that we actually arrive at a destination better than the one we've left. And I'm not sure we are in that position at the moment. I mean, we have a government who Boris has put in place on the basis of how much he can trust them, not on their ability. That doesn't mean to say no minister has got talent, because that's not true. But the primary purpose of them being in the cabinet is to support Boris. Now, that's not always perhaps the right thing to do. You need challenge. I mean, when Mrs. Thatcher was prime minister, she deliberately sought out people who would challenge her, not who constantly agreed with her. And that, I think, is a definition of great leadership. We could do with a bit more of that.
Excellent, yes. Hugh, my fourth and final question. Now, each episode of That Brexit Business Show, listeners enjoy your pointed view in the Hugh's View segment. You tell it as it is. So can you get out Hugh's crystal ball and look forward, say, another 5 years on the Brexit agenda and tell us what you think will happen or needs to happen during those 5 years?
Well, I think in 5 years, memories will fade a bit. And I think the raw lessons that were learned from our departure from the EU will fade. However, I don't think the importance of Europe will fade for us as a country. We will need to develop closer relationships with Europe for all kinds of reasons, be they security, be they trade, be they humanitarian. And I think we'll see a gradual rapprochement with Europe. And yet we can't go on fighting fish wars with France. So we can't go on fighting the issues of free movement of people. But there will, I think, emerge over a period of time some kind of consensus and rapprochement. That's my hope anyway. But we need to realise that, if you like, the pure Brexit experiment will not work.
Excellent. Thanks, Hugh. Well, that's our look back. Look today and look forward on Brexit. Don't miss our usual podcast shows every fortnight. Thanks for watching.